Looking at the news, it's easy to believe that no one has any idea what's happening with Brexit. And while that's partially true, we've made a timeline to help you understand what's going to happen next. Before watching this video, we recommend you check out our other video, which goes through what's happened with Brexit so far, before we jump into a timeline of what's to come. Okay, so once you know what's happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future? In September, the UK's Migration Advisory Council is set to publish a report on European migration to the UK. In this report, the Council are expected to show plans and evidence for a new migration relationship with the EU. On the 18th and 19th of October, there is an EU summit, and it's one of the UK's last chances to reach an agreement with the EU. With few months left until the UK is set to leave the EU, this summit is one of the last chances for the UK to get EU nations to sign off on the agreement. For an agreement to be reached, a supermajority of EU nations, meaning at least 20 out of the 27 states, need to agree to the terms, as well as 65% of the EU's population being represented. This doesn't mean that EU citizens get a vote on it all. Simply it means that the nations which agree to the bill must make up at least 65% of the EU's population, essentially giving larger nations more voting power than smaller ones. The EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier has set a date of October 31st as the point when the negotiations must be complete. Barnier says this is to allow enough time for EU nations to agree the deal. Therefore, if it isn't agreed at the October summit, there's very little time left to meet all of the deadlines. If an agreement isn't reached, there could be an emergency summit called for sometime later in the year, likely during November. Former Brexit Secretary David Davis said that he expected a November emergency summit to be when the agreement was finally struck. The very last EU summit of the year is to be held on the 13th and 14th of December, and this is pretty much the very last opportunity for an agreement to be reached. It's over a month after the deadline Barnier set, and a little more than 3 months until the UK is set to leave the EU, so leaving it this late is cutting it very, very fine. It's important to get to an agreement quickly, due to the number of steps needed to approve any agreements. May really needs this time, as she can use it to get parliamentary approval before the end of March 2019. And this won't be easy for May. With a very slim parliamentary majority, even when including the support she gets from the DUP, just a few defectors from her party could result in the agreement being voted down. Realistically, to give herself enough time, May will be looking to seek parliamentary approval in the first couple of months of 2019. So even into 2019, UK people still won't know if the agreement will be approved and finalised. As laid out in EU-UK agreements, on the 29th of March 2019, the UK will leave the EU and enter a transitional stage. This transitional period will end on the 31st of December 2020, at which point the UK will be completely separate from the EU, and their new relationship will fully begin. It isn't entirely clear what will happen on March 29th. Depending on the deal or lack of deal reached, this day could end up going a number of different ways. If a deal is reached, then there could be very little change, and a smooth transition to our new relationship would begin. If there's no deal, then there could be some pretty big consequences in what's called a cliff edge Brexit. To find out what that would mean, and what would happen on the day of Brexit if no deal was reached, check out our video on the topic. There's a link in the description. During the transitional period, the UK will have officially left the EU, meaning they can conduct certain types of trade negotiations which weren't previously permitted by EU law when the UK was still in the EU. The UK will still likely be in the single market, customs union and free trade area during this transitional time. However, they will still need to negotiate if they want continued access to these areas. Especially important is access to passporting rights, which allow the UK's profitable financial services industry to do business with EU nations. The even greater mystery is what will happen in January 2021. With the transitional phase over, the UK will be entirely out of the EU, and the new relationship will come into full force. If you feel like you're sick of people discussing Brexit now, I'm afraid you've still got a while to go yet. However, if you want to be kept up to date with what's happening between now and 2021, subscribe to TLDR News on YouTube. Also, in very exciting news, we're working on a book which answers all of your questions about Brexit in a way we couldn't do in our short videos. You can pre-order it now at a discounted price from Amazon. Check out Explaining Brexit, the Ultimate Guide, to support us and our content. There's a link in the description. Thank you.